This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, Rockets. It is another great day to join you guys and to be with you virtually. April 16th, a lot of news happening, a lot of things going on. We want to take an opportunity to thank all of those that are joining us on the call, and especially our sponsors, our industry partners, and our speakers, as well as all the members that are here to learn and ask questions related to SBA. This call is being recorded and is part of our antitrust statement. If anybody needs a copy of that, please find that on our website. Today, we're going to focus on SBA loans, and everything that is available or was available or may still be available. But we will answer all the questions you guys may have, and we have a great group of panelists that our buddy John was able to secure and bring forward. So I know a lot of people may have different questions related to when the country reopens, what business is like, what people are doing. Today, we want to specifically focus on SBA lending. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome our friend Andrew from Chemical Concepts, who has a few things to share with us, and then we'll get started with today's topic. Andrew, go ahead.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Lorenzo. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know me, again, I'm Andrew Morris with Chemical Concepts. I just wanted to start off, just give a quick thank you to the Rockhead Group for everything these guys are doing. You know, I think they're putting together some great programming. I'm sure you'd all agree. There's all these Thursday meetings. There's definitely been things that have helped me and our business, I can say for sure, during this crisis. So I was talking with John and Lorenzo, and they offered me a couple minutes at the top of this meeting here to share some stuff with you that might be helpful to you guys as you either continue to operate or if you're opening back up for anyone that's been shut down. So basically, every business that is still operating today is trying to figure out how we can keep the business operating, how you can protect employees, how to deal with the risk, both to personnel and to the business should someone get infected, should things spread to other employees and you know, maybe threaten another shutdown or putting you in a bad place. So we've put together a number of products and solutions to kind of try and help companies, help fabricators deal with this. I did have a couple of slides, and you know, Lorenzo and Amanda, you know, feel free, and John, shut me up. I'll try and keep this as brief as I can, but give me the high sign or whatever. Now, I did send over a couple of slides. Did you have any of those slides handy?
Yes, give me just 1 second.
Sure. So while they're getting that ready, we do have one thing in particular that I think is the best solution I've seen yet in terms of disinfecting, and that's a product that's called Ramsol RS1, and they're going to pull up an image of it really quickly. And basically what this is it's a almost like it's a bulk delivery system. It's a pressurized canister full of a disinfectant product. You can almost think of it as like a big barbecue propane tank full of Lysol. And it's a great system for very quickly sanitizing equipment, sanitizing your facility, sanitizing common areas, forklifts, inside of vehicles, you name it. And yeah, you can see the picture of that pulled up. It does contain an EPA pre-approved product. The ACC, which is the American Council of the American Chemistry Council, they have a subdivision called the CBC, which is the Center for Biologicidal Chemistries. They've put together a list of pre-approved chemicals hand in hand with the EPA that are known to be effective against coronaviruses, and they've been pre-approved for this particular virus, which is SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19, the disease. And what's unique about this is just the delivery system, number one, and then number two, just the product itself being effective, and then availability is number one. You know, there's just been a run on these kinds of products, so everybody's kind of scrambling, looking for material. So you see the overview slide up here, so it's really looking at fast application time, the coverage. You know, there is a value there in buying this kind of delivery and saving time and labor. You know, the versatility of being able to spray, you know, inside a vehicle where you might not be able to do with a liquid, and then we are offering some Rockhead member benefits. So this isn't really the time for me to get into a lot of specifics. If you have questions about this, we do want to be a resource for members, so feel free to contact me. if you don't have my contact information, John Lorenzo, I'm sure would be happy to pass that along. I don't know how much time we have. I could show the next slide. There's a real quick video, and I could just show you 30 seconds of it so you can see how this product is applied, just to kind of give people an idea. Otherwise, this will just be in, I'm sure they'll make this stuff available afterwards. If you wanted to kind of check it out, you can.
Andrew, we'll post that on our website for everybody
Sure.
with a link for everybody and share it.
Perfect. So
we'll also put it in our private Facebook shared forum as well.
Okay. And just the last thing I'll say is that, so that's something that's interesting. Feel free to talk to me about that. We'd like to help you out if it's something that you think would help your business. We're also putting together, kind of a whole suite of products to help companies deal with, the present moment we're in. We've got some hand sanitizer coming in. We're looking, getting some face shields coming in. So we just want to be a resource to help you guys. And then in addition to all the products that you would normally buy from us, all our adhesives, sealants, tapes. So that's kind of an update for us. So anyway, just in closing, definitely we're struggling through this too. I'm sure you guys are, and we just want to be a partner for you guys, help any way we can, and try and all get through this together. So anyway, just appreciate again, John Lorenzo, give me that 2 seconds, and if you have a second to chat later, feel free to get in touch.
No, Andrew, thanks for
Andrew,
being on, and thanks
really appreciate it.
showing us your information, and obviously thinking about product offering that would benefit the network and the team most importantly. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, I'll let you talk about the important stuff of SBA lending now.
Absolutely. So I'm having a hard time with PowerPoint and sort of displaying my full screen. So I'm just going to keep it running like this if it's okay with you guys. But today's topic obviously is about SBA lending, and John has worked really hard in developing programs that could benefit the members in driving not only their profitability, but also the options that are available to them. So with us today, we have Luke from American Express. Luke, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So Luke is here from American Express, and he provides financing options for you guys to utilize from an operational standpoint. We all, such as purchasing materials, paying for certain services, and things like that. So he'll talk about that. We also have Chad, whom a lot of you guys met in Vegas. He's with Wells Fargo, and he is a relationship manager providing consumer financing, and they're running a 0% financing program right now exclusive to the Rocket Group. We have Art from Huntington Bank. And Art, if you could take a few minutes to introduce yourself, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure. Hey guys, this is Art D. Pompey. I am a community development construction lender at Huntington Bank. Previous life was a traditional commercial real estate lender. Been with Huntington for about 10 years and had to dive headfirst into the world of SBA as we received about 30,000 applications last week. So pleasure to meet everybody.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you very much, Art. Thanks for joining us today. We also have our next contestant, getting our next presenter, is a very skilled lawyer in the field. And we're really happy to welcome, hold on a second, Matt from Benesh Bank or Benesh Law Firm. He's a partner. So if you could introduce yourself, Matt, please.
Thanks, Lorenzo, and thanks, John, for inviting me onto the call. My name is Matt Dalguide. I'm a partner in the commercial finance and banking group at Benesh. We're a regional law firm headquartered out of Cleveland. We do have offices all around the country. I tend to focus my practice on commercial finance and other contract matters, corporate M&A work, and general corporate counseling. I've also, I don't know if I really know what I was volunteering for, but I did volunteer to be the lead at my firm for understanding the debt facilities under the CARES Act. So I've kind of become the ad hoc expert on that within my firm.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to see what you have to share with us. And we also have Ryan from Terra Real Estate Capital. He's the principal there, and he's the one that has essentially brought all this group together. And so, Ryan, thanks for being here. If you could tell us about yourself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Happy to be here this afternoon. I own a small boutique investment banking firm called Terra Real Estate Capital, located in Cleveland, Ohio. And I've gotten to know John Kaplan over the past, 6 or 12 months or so. And we typically focus on a lot of construction lending, rehabilitation lending, but my background, as well as some of my team's background, is in the small business lending space. So we've got good connections with small business offices as well as small business and lenders such as Huntington Bank, where Art works at currently. And we currently are focused on not only the CARES Act, but some of the things that we're going to talk about today, specific to the EIDL loans, as well as what will be known as the Main Street Lending Fund, which I think some of the folks on the phone will find interesting, although it's not yet fully up and running as of yet. So we're here to help, as John probably has explained to some of you that are on the call. And we look at this as a great opportunity to help people in an extremely difficult time. As you can imagine, that not only my company, but yours is going through some very significant changes. And I do think through that change comes a lot of opportunity for everybody. So we're here to help facilitate that and help people. And at the end of the day, hopefully answer some questions and provide as much clarity as we can on the programs that are out there.
Great, thank you, Ryan. And before we go to our moderator, I'd like to once again welcome Mr. Jim Heave from the Natural Stone Institute for joining us one more time and being part of these calls. And I also know that we invited some special guests from ISFA that may be also on the call. So anybody that is not a Rocket member, welcome to the call, and know that John, myself, and Amanda have been working hard to make sure that we have not only good content, but also really good programs to benefit your business, especially during these critical times. With that said, I'd like to make an introduction to the person that's not last, but always first, and the one that's been working night and night or late nights. Probably the most hated person by my wife at this point, because we've been developing a lot of things for you guys. And John has done a really good thing in leading the pack and bringing this forward. So, John, thank you for making this happen, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you, Lorenzo, for those kind words. We were saying earlier prior to the call that there's the COVID-19, but his wife says there's the Kaplan 2020. So stay tuned. So just wanted to kind of do since it's a political time, do a little bit of the Donald Trump. We actually had a presentation put together with a PowerPoint. We got so many questions regarding the calculation of the forgiveness and comparing the EIDL versus the PPP that we just decided to dive in and go straight to the Q&A part of the discussion, because that really can take up a good portion of the call. I also want to mention, everybody, that there is got a good amount of questions that came in advance, so I'm going to start with those. And then we want this to be an open roundtable as we coin these open mics. But also, if something comes up while you're thinking, please use the chat box, which is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and type in, and I'll try to read those questions off as well. But if you can, if you're comfortable chiming in, that'd be great, because we want to make it somewhat interactive, which is important in these calls. And that's really what the Rockheads is all about. Again, I want to thank the panel and the guys attending the call. Lorenzo S on the screen. Again, I'll repeat, if we can direct the calls, we got Art the banker, Matt the lawyer, Ryan the investment banker, Luke from American Express Purchasing, and Chad from Consumer Financing, all different things that can help our business as we go through these times. We tried to bring to the table, and hopefully we'll cover them today. So thank you guys for your time. Also, again, thank our guests that are on, and we're reaching out. We've reached out to try to help people in SFA, and we have ISFA on the call as well. So thank you guys, and thank you, Amy, for reaching out as well. So I'm just going to dive right in and get into some of the questions. So the first question that one of the bigger ones that came in from Sandy at Rumford Stone. I'm not going to read in detail, but I'm going to let one of the guys on the panel handle it. I'll start from the beginning. So if all the funds are not used in the 8 weeks and allowed for forgiveness, can the balance be used for the same act, specified cost, as long as the remaining funds are used by September 30th? There's some concern about fraud and audits, and people want to make sure that they don't get themselves in trouble. I guess the trouble part of it probably should go towards our attorney. Matt, maybe you can add some color to that. Maybe not.
Maybe
Matt, are you there?
Sorry, guys, I was on mute. Excuse me. Can you hear me now? Okay, John?
Yeah, we got you great.
Okay, sorry about that. So Sandy, to answer your question, yeah, you can, if you don't use the full loan within the 8 weeks after the loan was funded, you are right that it won't be forgiven, but you are still allowed to maintain that amount of debt, as cash in your balance sheet, and you can then use that for one of the permitted purposes, which is payroll, rent, interest, or utilities. I'm not sure where you saw it at, but I don't think there's any type of requirement that the money be used by September 30th. The only caveat I would say is if you don't use it within 8 weeks, of course you have to repay it, and there's that starts to amortize after the end of the initial 6-month period that the loan is deferred.
Thank you. And did I see somewhere that it's now not at 1%, but it's been jumped to 2%?
No, the funding for the interest rate for the loan is still 1%. And just to be clear, because some people have asked about this, other clients, the interest on the loan is never forgiven. You have to pay all the interest, no matter if all the loan or none of the loan is ultimately forgiven, but it is only accruing at 1%.
Thank you.
Sure.
So a little more detail on there. It says the lender has to decide in 60 days of the borrower's application, and the SBA will fund within 90 days of the date of the forgiveness. You know what that means?
Yeah, once a borrower submits their request for forgiveness to their lender, I believe the lender has 60 days to process that request, and then there's a little bit of back time on the SBA. So similar to how up front the lenders were given 15 days to process an application for the initial advance, same thing on the back end. Once you get your application in for forgiveness with all your supporting documentation, the lender has a 60-day period to review that.
Got it. And how much time do you have to submit the forgiveness calculation?
It's actually interesting, and I don't know, Ryan or Art, if you guys are seeing anything different on this. Art, you might be a little bit closer to it on the bank side, but the bill itself doesn't actually specify when you have to, what like the end date is for being able to submit the request for forgiveness. But obviously, you have to wait for the initial 8 weeks to be up so that you can have your full calculation in hand. But I think what I've been hearing is kind of July 1st might be roughly the earliest date that the banks are actually going to start accepting in practice the application for forgiveness.
So just for clarity, so July 1st, but then is there a certain amount of time that you have? Can it be a year later that you submit for that or pull that together, or is there a certain time you have to get it in by?
To me, that's unclear right now. There's no sunset date in the bill or any of the guidance that's been submitted. I suspect, though, that the SBA will be issuing some updated guidance shortly now that they've gone through the initial rush of applications that gives a little bit more detail on some of those granular questions.
Got it. All right, thank you, Matt. Just a little more detail. I've been asked this question as well, as one of the bullet points that Sandy has is, can you expand a little more on what the funds have to be used for and how we go about allocating those funds, such as payroll, group insurance, 401k, matching, are all those things? And is there anything else you could add on to that?
Yeah, generally speaking, it wasn't specified in the bill, but the updated guidance that came out from the SBA is requiring that two things. One, 75% of your funds that are used, no matter if they're used during the initial 8 weeks and that ultimately get forgiven or later on, those have to be used for payroll costs, and that's a defined term in the bill. So that includes things like wages, salaries, if you have workers on hourly who are maybe fabricators or installers, it will include that. Commissions and bonuses are included in there. Employer's portion of healthcare costs, employer's portion of 401k match, and a couple of other items. Those have to be utilized, funds have to be utilized 75% for payroll costs. And then on the back end for forgiveness, whenever you're applying for it, 75% of the amount that is forgiven has to be derived from payroll costs as well. There's some penalties that are involved if you don't follow the guidelines for that. It could result in forfeiture of your ability to get the loan forgiven, or having to prepay loans.
Gotcha. Great. Sandy, did we cover that in full for you?
Yeah, that really was my biggest question. I've already prepared a spreadsheet and have do we hit the 75%? And also, if your payroll number of payroll is reduced more than 25%, that's another hit too. So we have all those little formulas in there, and we're ready to rockhead. Thank you again.
Great.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you. Lorenzo, you want to go to the next question? Okay, this one's from Dwayne at Stone Interiors. So can you get both a PPP loan and the EIDL or economic disaster loan? That might be a good one for Ryan, correct?
I haven't talked yet, so I'll take that one. So yeah, you can definitely apply for the PPP, and you definitely can apply for the EIDL. I know that they're not taking any more EIDL applications as of last night. So I think that particular program was somewhere around 50 to 75 billion was the number, somewhere in there. And they're not taking any of those currently. So I do think they'll approve more coming up here relatively soon. So you'll be able to resubmit. But I think it's important for people to keep in mind that the SBA itself employs about 4,000 people nationwide. And, Huntington Bank, for example, employs 20,000 people, in the Midwest and various portions of the country. So the SBA is getting backlogged with these at a rate that they've never seen before, which is taking some time to get them processed. So if you've submitted an EIDL, it's going to be every bit of 4 to 6 weeks before you likely hear back from them. And in terms of getting funding, I think it's going to be a little bit longer than that. So to answer that second question, John, because it kind of goes into the next point of it, which is, can I use the disaster loan proceeds for expenses that are not eligible under the PPP? And yes, the answer is that you can, and you should. I mean, that's kind of the point for it. The payments to the 1099 subs, as Art and I kind of learned, early this week, they changed the rules on that, where you were able to originally submit for the 1099s, and you no longer are able to do that, as the 1099 employees are going to submit directly for those under the sole proprietor and 1099 portions of the act, the CARES Act. So that actually got changed on Monday of this week. So this program is really fluid at the end of the day, and it's been ever changing. So that's something important to keep in mind. And then on question 3, John, I'm not exactly sure.
I think the way it got worded on the slide, it's really kind of an extension of, can you use the proceeds for vendor payments or 1099 subcontractors? So I think it's kind of really into question 2.
I gotcha. Yeah, and Matt, stop me if I'm wrong on this, because I know this part of it gets technical. You can use the money for 1099, but that's just not going to get, that part's not going to get forgiven by the bank. And I think everybody needs to just kind of take a step back and look at the program in its totality. We're talking about a 1% loan that is not guaranteed, that has no collateral associated with it. So at the end of the day, as long as you use it within the guidelines of the program, and then within the guardrails of those regulations, even if you don't get some of it forgiven, it's still it's a phenomenal loan facility. And as long as you're not committing fraud, which I don't think anybody on the phone or the line is going to do that, if you don't get it all forgiven, at the end of the day, it's not the worst thing in the world either. So it's just something to keep in mind. And just, we've been coaching people, and I know Matt has and Art has as well, because he's been taking a lot of the applications, to make sure that whatever you're presenting, you're comfortable with presenting, and that you have backup documentation for that. And if you have the backup documentation, the banks are going to process so many of these that I think, they're going to be very flexible in working with people. And I also think it's important for everybody on the line to keep in mind, the government has given the banks a very short and flexible leash on this program. It is very different than the SBA loans that they normally make, where there's a lot of regulations around them, and the bank has a lot of recourse if they make a mistake on the loans. And this particular one, part of the slowdown in getting everything issued was what recourse did the banks have if there is an error. And the Federal Reserve Bank and the SBA have basically blessed them with a pretty broad authority to get these loans done, which is great for everybody on the line and anybody that's applied for it. So I hope that answers the questions, John.
Wayne, did that get your answer?
Yeah, generally speaking, but like I said specifically, because I know we had seen documentation that said you could get a PPP and a disaster loan as long as the disaster loan wasn't used for the same purposes as the PPP loan. So that's kind of where I was going with, if we take a disaster loan as well as the PPP, as long as we're using it on vendor payments, on paying 1099 subs, things like that, we shouldn't cause any issue with our PPP loan. I guess it's really.
I agree
right.
with that.
Yeah, I'll speak up now. It's Art. That's actually explicit in the SBA guidelines that the EIDL loan needs to be used for something other than what the PPP loan is being used for. So yes, you're absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So it's fine that they're both related and that one's not from some other kind of disaster.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we're basically telling clients right now to look at your balance sheet, look at your liabilities, your payables. Any payable that's not payroll, rent, interest, or utilities, use your EIDL loan to pay for that. That's a simple way to make sure you're staying in compliance.
Gotcha. That's great information. Great information. This kind of actually lends into a good point and a good strategy that I was actually talking to Luke from American Express on how to best use their program coupled with this program. Luke, maybe you want to add a little bit of color of how to best use the American Express program that we have.
Sure, John. Thanks for having me. Hope everyone is staying safe, your families as well, and employees and all that kind of good stuff. A lot of y'all members do have American Express programs, meaning you use the American Express card in your business to pay suppliers. And why that really matters right now is if you're able to pay a supplier right now with your American Express card, you don't have to pay out that you don't have to pay what you charged until later. And a lot of y'all do this. Some of y'all might have American Express programs where you're just spending on more like incidental purchases or, travel and entertainment, stuff like that. But really think of using your American Express now to pay vendors because you're going to get a little bit of time. Now it varies for each individual person depending on your limit, et cetera. But if you're able to pay suppliers now and not pay them until later, that gives you a little bit more ability to keep your cash on hand longer, use that cash for other things in your business. The folks that, don't have American Express, American Express has not shut down. We're still up and running, and we are opening new accounts for enabling people to do this. If you don't have a program, I'd highly recommend looking into it as a way of keeping cash in hand longer. And then when you pay your bill, obviously you can get points or a cash discount that can go back into your business to offset expenses.
Thank you, Luke. I
John,
appreciate it.
one more thing I'll say is as a best practice, some of y'all might be thinking, well, these vendors have always told me if I want to use my Amex card, or they won't do it, they won't take my Amex card. Now more than ever, merchants or suppliers really want to be paid in a guaranteed form. And you paying them with your American Express, they're getting their funds the next day, guaranteed, and then you pay American Express later. So rather than them waiting on a check for you, they're willing right now to say, okay, give me your Amex. I'm going to charge it for $40,000, and then if you don't pay Amex, that's Amex's problem, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, Lorenzo, let's go to the next question from Brian Burns. Okay, so this is one that it's going to be pretty detailed. A lot of some of it. This is one that everybody's looking for, how to calculate the forgiveness. So the question is the forgiveness portion of the payroll based on pay wages or actual wages? So is it the cash out the door, or is it based on the payroll run? This timing affects the amount of the forgivable payroll calculated. I'm not sure who would want to handle this one. Matt?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm not 100% sure on the answer to this. And maybe Art knows a little bit better because he's on the bank side. But what we've been advising clients, I think the question here is, what happens if you're sort of halfway through a payroll period and you get to the end of your 8 weeks? Can I count, that stub period between my last payroll and the end of the 8 weeks as a payroll cost? I don't know the answer to that. I think the conservative thing to do, if you could swing it, would be to contact your payroll provider if you use an outside service, or if you do it internally, to have your internal person set up for it and do maybe an interim period payroll run. I'm very confident that if you pay out the payroll within the 8-week period, that it's going to get forgiven. What's not clear to me is what happens if you run halfway through a payroll period and you end, 8 weeks ends and you still have another week left in the period and you don't pay it out till after. I think that's a little bit open for interpretation. So the safer bet would be to contact, you have ADP, or I don't know if Rock has a preferred provider, or someone does it internally for each of the people on the lines. But I would start discussing with the people that are handling that to make sure that whatever date is 8 weeks from the funding of your loan, that if that doesn't end on a payroll date when you normally pay it out, that you if your cash flow of your business permits it, that you get the payroll paid for that interim period, and that way you're pretty insulated from any risks.
Gotcha. Art, do you have any more detail on that?
I don't. That was pretty good, but I do not know.
Does anybody on the call might have any insight on that? Anybody else looked into that?
Hey, John.
I guess my question is, John, shouldn't you calculate the full-time employees in the exact same manner, like from the covered period from before that you're using versus you have them in the last week and they work 30 hours or full-time for one of the 8 weeks? So they would count for 1/8 of that covered period. Like, why would that not be the conservative approach, I guess? It seems like that's the right way to calculate a full-time employee if that's what you're going to use, or whatever formula you use at the beginning should be the same one you use at the end.
The formula, this is Matt, the formula in the beginning as far as for qualification doesn't necessarily matter. The determining whether you were under 500 for headcount was not based on a full-time equivalent standard, but the reduction factor, which I think is what you're talking about for payroll, is based on a full-time equivalent standard. I'll tell you that there's nothing in the bill which that specifies what type of criteria the SBA is using for a full-time equivalent standard. We've looked back at a number of other programs that the SBA has implemented that were kind of special programs, and each time they tend to, if it's relevant, they tend to specify how they're using the full-time equivalent standard, and they haven't done that yet. So I would be on the lookout for updated guidance. We're certainly keeping a lookout on that for our clients because we have a lot of people that will be affected by that. So the last program I saw that the SBA implemented they use 30 hours a week as a full-time standard, but that's going to be fact specific. And it's, as you've probably seen, this is a very fluid situation, a lot of guidance coming out. It seems like by the day, and this is one of the things we're hoping we get guidance on, but
I guess that's
not clear yet.
I read the question that he has a little bit differently, because if you go through like the PPP calculation that John sent out, like if you had 100 full-time employees, and that's what you base it off of when you did the 119 or from 2/1 to 330 or whatever the calculation was for, and then you only have 50 employees, so you had 100 before and you have 50 now, you have a 50% reduction in that payroll cost. And if you have a person that comes back for an eighth of the week, you're not getting forgiven for their full amount. You're only getting forgiven for 50% of their wages. So I think it's important to understand if you're going to actually be able to be forgiven for all of their wages that you've paid or only a portion of them. And the way this spreadsheet's set up is it's actually only a portion of the wages you're going to be forgiven for.
Yeah, that's actually correct. I think we were going to get to that on a later question, John. I don't know if you want to go over the calculation now, but whoever was speaking there, you are correct that there is a factor you have to multiply that deals with kind of a percentage of your full-time equivalent employees versus prior periods.
And I think it's kind of coupling a couple questions here, which is the number 3, which is when you restore the payroll in the forgiveness. So maybe I'll just hop to that question, which kind of lends into it. And I know I've just been receiving calls, same question. So I don't have a problem if we just go right to it. So I'll go to the number 3, and then I think it will parlay into that question. So has there been any clarification on what it means to restore payroll by June 30th? Does that mean they must be on payroll by June 30th or be there for a week, a month? How long? What is it about that date that we need to nail down?
Yeah, hey, John, it's Ryan. I think, in my opinion, and Matt, weigh in on this because this is a great question. It's a really, really good question. That you have to have, if you had 100 employees before, you need to have 100 employees on June 30th. I don't think for a week, a month. I just think by June 30th, they need to be starting to be paid. I mean, that's the way we're interpreting it. That's the way we're reading it. Matt, do you have anything to articulate further on that or add further, or Art?
Well, Ryan,
Yeah,
go
ahead, Lorenzo.
This is Lorenzo. Ryan, does that mean that you have to have the same number of headcount or the same number of payroll dollars or the same people? Because I know some people are also talking about making some layoffs or reductions based on loss of business. But do you have to have the same number of people, payroll dollars, or the same people?
You don't have to have the same exact people. So say you laid someone off and they found another job, they don't have to be the same exact person. So it just needs to be the same amount of FTEs. So Matt, do you want to? I know we've gone round and round about this one. So do you want to continue further on that?
Yeah, I agree with what Ryan said. There is a little bit of confusion on that, but basically what the bill says is that if you reduce your full-time equivalents between February 15th and 30 days after the act was passed, which effectively is April 26th, and your forgiveness amount was reduced as a result of that, if you get back to your February 15th employment number based on FTEs by June 30th, then you're not going to get hit with the reduction. Same thing with salaries. If you cut salaries for those making less than $100,000 a year by more than 25%, and if that cut happened between February 15th of 2020 and April 26th of 2020, if you get all of those people who were cut back to their February 15th pay scale, then you won't take a reduction in your forgiveness amount based on that. So there are different time periods you're looking at when you're talking about reduction amount.
Matt, let me give you a very specific example.
Sure.
If I have 25 employees and because of loss of business or whatever situation is going on, I reduce that number to 15 employees, and I got, say, $100,000 for the 25 employees. If I spend the $100,000 on those 15 employees, does that free me up from having to pay that number, or do I need to go back to 25 employees? That's the first question.
No, generally speaking, it wouldn't free you up from having to pay the 100,000. So let me go through this. This will get a little bit technical, but I think it'll answer a lot of people's questions. John, if you're okay with that, I can run through the equation.
No, that'd be
I think
great.
it'll help people understand it.
Just because I know that some
So
people are asking, what happens if
Yeah.
I decide to bring people back and give them a bonus, but instead of bringing 25 back, I bring 15 and just pay people more money?
Right.
Hey,
So,
John,
okay, so that's going to impact two sides.
Before you
That's
answer
going to
that,
impact. Go ahead, Ryan.
we had that slide. I don't know, Lorenzo, if you're able to pull that up, that if Matt's going to walk through.
Because
He's
of the
got that-
presentation, want to go back to your PowerPoint?
Yeah. I mean, Matt, that you did a really nice job with that, and I think that would help.
I'll show it.
Yeah, that would be good so people can get a visual of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Give me a second.
Sure.
Just so everybody knows, there was a good bunch of questions that were sent ahead of time. I'm trying to address those, and I also see the ones in the chat box, so I'm not forgetting about those, but trying to do the ones that were sent ahead of time first.
Or you guys keep on talking while I'm pulling this up, because everybody seems to be online these days.
All right, while you're
Okay,
pulling
so-
that up, there's another good question here that we could hold on that one payment, but this is more strategic, and I've actually had a lot of these questions as well. So if we delayed rent payments for a month, say in April, and then caught them back up after they were approved for the loan for the 8-week period, would that qualify as forgiveness? So from a strategy, pushing, maybe working some arrangement out with your landlord or your own related real estate entity, can you push some payments into that 8-week period and get forgiveness?
Yeah, I mean, the way it's defined, John, and the way it's written in the bill is as long as you use it for rent, you're in good shape and it qualifies. So I think there's going to be a lot of people in that particular circumstance. So you're using it for rent, you're in good shape.
I agree with that.
Okay, so that's a good strategy. Okay.
All right, I'm back.
We talked about that one.
Let me pull up that page
Okay.
that we're referring to. You can look at it. Well, it's not opening up. Never mind, keep going. It's not working.
While he's doing
All
that,
right, so another good question that Brian had is, will bonuses and temporary wage increases count towards payroll costs? So another strategy, moving bonuses or wage increases during that 8-week period, build some goodwill, or retaining bonuses, things of that sort. Is that a good strategy to do, kind of similar to the rent?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. When we get to the slide, you'll see how the economics of that work out. It may not be dollar for dollar depending on what your headcount is compared to a prior period, but yes, generally speaking, it will be included in payroll.
And John, jumping back to that other question about the rent, I mean, I have to assume that a lot of the folks on the call here, own their own real estate and, rent it from themselves, so to speak. So, I mean, there's a level of creativity that you can get into with that if you're concerned about not using the money for if you get a pot of money and you can't use it all within that 8-week period. I think that that's something you can do, legally. Okay, I want to stress that, where you're using it for rent. And, if your landlord charged you, which a lot of them are doing, a late fee, they're charging interest on not being able to pay, on time. So it's something to think about with purposes of being creative and again, just keeping it within the guardrails of the program.
Hey, Lorenzo, go back up. You hit the slide already. It's probably like slide 6, I believe. Go back up one more. Keep going.
One more.
I think it's actually one more above that, right there. I don't know, right there.
Yeah.
No, that's not it. I'm sorry. Go one more above it.
I'm delayed.
Go 2 up.
It's the forgiveness. 2 up.
2 up slide. There you go.
Nope.
No, that's not it either. It's in there.
All right. Is that it?
Nope, keep going down.
Sorry, guys.
Keep going. Keep going down.
That's it.
No, it's next one down, I think. Yeah, this is it, guys. Okay, so let's just walk through the calculation. I'm going to use rough numbers here so that people can put, just concrete details with how we're calculating it. So when you're looking at the forgiveness amount, the initial thing you have to think about is you're only looking at what your spend is during the 8 weeks after the loan is funded, okay? So let's assume that your loan got funded on April 1st to make it easy. Your 8-week period would end sometime at the end of May. You're going to look at 4 things you spend money on during that period. The first is payroll costs, then there's rent, then there's interest, and then there's utilities. Overarching themes here, 75% of what ultimately is forgiven has to come from payroll costs. And just like when you were calculating payroll costs for the front end of the loan, when they had that $100,000 cap on salary for employees, that's also going to apply to the back end of forgiveness as well. So what you first want to do is you want to add up what you spend on payroll, rent, interest, and utilities in the 8 weeks after the loan is funded. Okay, you're going to take that number. You're then going to multiply that number by a fraction. The numerator of the fraction, this is kind of in the first bullet point there, the numerator of that fraction is going to be the monthly average number of full-time equivalent employees you have during the 8 weeks after which the loan was funded. Okay, so top number in the fraction, monthly average number of FTEs for the 8 weeks after the funding of the loan. Denominator of the fraction is going to be the same number, monthly average number of full-time equivalents, but it's going to be based on one of 2 time periods. The first time period is either February 15th of 19 through June 30th of 19, and the second option is between January 1st of 20 and February 29th of 20, and the borrower gets to choose which time period they use for the denominator, okay? So you're basically multiplying that initial calculation, which was rent, interest, payroll, utilities for 8 weeks after funding of the loan, and you're multiplying that by a percentage, and you get that percentage by dividing your full-time equivalent employees on average per month for the 8 weeks after funding over your average number of monthly full-time equivalent employees for one of those 2 periods. So when you're strategizing, you want to look back at your payroll records, figure out as between February 15th of 19 and June 30th of 19 versus January 1st of 20 and February 29th of 20, when did I have fewer full-time equivalent employees on my payroll? And I'm going to use that time period, okay? So if you, I will go with some numbers. If you had your total amount you spent on payroll, rent, utilities, and interest during the 8 weeks after the loan was funded was $1 million, okay? And you had, on average, on a monthly basis, 20 full-time equivalent employees in the 8 weeks after the loan was funded versus maybe 25 for one of the other periods there. Your forgiveness amount would be $1 million times 20 or 25, which is 80%. So you would get forgiven $800,000 in that example. So to answer, I forget who was asking the question before. You're not guaranteed to get dollar for dollar forgiveness if you goose pay to employees still on the payroll, if you give them a bonus or if you increase their hourly rate or have some kind of special compensation. That's still going to be subject to this reduction factor. The other piece where forgiveness is going to be impacted is if you have people on the payroll making less than $100,000 and you cut their wages by more than 25%, you're going to lose on your forgiveness dollar for dollar every dollar above 25% that you cut their wages. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you have someone who makes $50,000 a year and you cut their wages by $15,000. Under this calculation, you would lose 25% of the $50,000 is $12,500, and you cut by $15,000. So for that particular employee, you would lose $2,500 of loan forgiveness based on that reduction. You can reduce salaries by up to 25% before you see any impact on the forgiveness reduction. Hopefully that makes sense. I know it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, and I just want to add another just to kind of help support that, when I sent out the forgiveness, the PPP calculator, I don't know if everybody noticed, but there's a tab 3 on that calculator called forgiveness, and it actually takes through that calculation with another example that follows exactly what Matt just explained as well. So hopefully that will help.
Like I said, so if you get hit with a reduction in your forgiveness amount because your head count, on average in the 8 weeks after funding was different or lower, I should say, than one of the prior 2 periods, or if you cut salaries by 25% or more during that period, and by June 30th, you get your head count. Now this is key. By June 30th, you have to have your head count back up to where it was at February 15th of 20, and you have to get wages, if they were cut by more than 25%, up to back where they were by February 15th of 20. Those reduction factors are deemed to go away, and you're not going to get disadvantaged by that.
So I guess that's the key, though, is how are you calculating those full-time employees? Because the calculation of the numerator and the denominator is what's important.
Yeah.
So what qualifies as a full-time employee? Is it regular, overtime, holiday hours? Or someone asked about temporary workers. If you have temp labor, could you count that? What if you have salary people that don't necessarily record hours? Could you record them on the back end?
Yeah, the SBA has not, I'll just tell you straight up, the SBA has not issued guidance on that. I've had that question come up from a number of clients, especially in the manufacturing space, where you have, hourly workers who sometimes have their shifts changed or their hours cut or increased, or they have overtime or holiday pay. The answer is we just don't know yet. Like I said, I've spoken with partners in my labor group and asked them directly, is there some kind of standard definition for what a full-time equivalent employee is? And they said, no, there's nothing under the law. But as I mentioned, the SBA generally, when they implement programs like this, sets a standard for what they will determine as a full-time equivalent employee, and they just haven't done that yet here, so I can't give you a solid answer on that. I'm sorry.
Has there been a precedent, though, in the past on any programs like this?
There have been other programs that have used 30 hours per week as their threshold, but I can't sit here and tell you that's what they're going to use for this program.
Yeah, I guess the question, though, then is, I guess the reason I think about that being important is because it might be better to have someone work some overtime then to get ahead in the 8-week period as opposed to maybe delaying some things. So, like, right, if you want to, I look at it as it might be able to get a week ahead of production and work 9 weeks in 8 and then boost their full-time employees by having them work some overtime.
Yeah, it's possible that might be the case. Like I said, you do have a little bit of flexibility. I don't know, Ryan and Art, what you guys think, but I'm expecting that the SBA is going to release some additional guidance on some of these forgiveness factors. The way I'm thinking of it is they were so focused on getting the applications in. All of the supplemental guidance they've issued so far has really been based on how you do the application and how you calculate initial payroll amounts. And now that they've got that number up to where the program's almost fully funded, they're going to start focusing on the forgiveness questions, just trying to stay, a little bit ahead of the curve.
Could we get information on that, John? I mean, this is a question for you, I guess. If we can get information on that when it's available from Matt, just because that obviously that time clock started for, it seems like a few of us that are on here that have already received funds, because our time period starts the day we receive funds. So, I mean, that's why I'm asking for any kind of precedent that's been set so I can make some kind of evaluation on it.
Yeah, I can tell you the one item I saw most recently was 30 hours a week. But we have a team of 4 lawyers at the firm who are working on this pretty much around the clock. So we're going to submit updated guidance once, basically within a day or so when the SBA updates their guidance. So we'll make sure to get that to John and he can push it out to the group.
Thanks.
Appreciate that, Matt.
Sure.
Okay, let's go to next questions. Obviously, we're going to run over. I just want to be appreciative of your guys' time. We're pushing the hour, and these guys have been really, really generous with their time. How much time do you guys have, so I can make sure I'm respectful of what you guys have available here?
I'm pretty good. I've got time.
Hey, John, it's Art. I have a 3 o'clock call that I have to hop on.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Huntington? Yeah, let me just, with that being said, I'm going to maybe, Art, if you could kind of maybe give a broad brush on where things stand from Huntington, which is one of the top 3 SBA lenders in the country, what you're seeing from funds availability. There's a lot of questions. There's news that all the funds are dried up. What's your input on that before you go?
Yeah, I think the I think the loans are going to start getting funded here in the next week. I know the SBA group has been working hard. They're pulling in other folks from other areas of the bank to help close and fund these loans. Like I talked about earlier, it was kind of a first in, first out approach. So if you got your application in and it's being underwritten and is provided an SBA number, the intent there is that everything should be status quo in the sense that the money should be available for you. I would assume that the dollars, some people have already gotten some of the funds from other banks. I'm not really sure how much we've actually funded to date. I know our commitments are sizable. I'll probably get the number wrong, so I won't even say it, but again, over 30,000 applications. So I would assume that in the next week or so, some of the proceeds are going to start being dispersed. There is talk of another tranche coming out from the federal government in addition to the Main Street lending platform. So more to come on that, I would assume. We're all kind of waiting on bated breath. The good news is that I just did get word DeWine said he's looking to start reopening Ohio on May 1st. So that should be some good news, I think. We'll have to see what that looks like. But I think as we've had all of our conversations with the SBA and the Fed, we're trying to do everything, we being the banking community, trying to do everything we can to uphold the small businesses, small, medium, and large, really to get us out of this and get things moving back to where they were. So I would assume, again, the funds are forthcoming, hopefully by the end of the month. I would say definitely within the next week or so, but we'll see what happens.
Okay, appreciate your time again. Thank you. And thanks for your time. I was going to just one quick more question before you go.
Yeah, sure.
How are smaller banks funding? Are they funding in advance of getting approval from the SBA? How are some happening faster than others?
That's a great question. I'm actually not sure. There may be other banks that aren't regulated by the OCC that have the ability to fund quicker in their SBA groups, but honestly, I'm new to this, so I'm commercial real estate lending over to the SBA world. So I'm really not.
I'm just trying to help people that are
Yeah,
nervous that they're not going to get funded. Yeah. Okay, Ryan, go for it.
I can address that. So,
thank you again, Art. Appreciate it.
Sure, guys.
thank you, man, and really great job for the folks at Huntington. I know you guys are working 24/7. You guys are doing awesome. So we really appreciate it, and just make sure you hit the wire button, okay, sometime soon, buddy. All right.
If I could find the button, man, I'm pressing it. I promise.
Great. Anyway, John, so some of the smaller banks will take the risk at funding the loan prior to it being approved by the SBA. So if they know their customer really well, so for example, there's a little bank here in Ohio that we work with. Actually, it's not a PA, but they have offices in Ohio called Erie Bank. And if they know the customer really well, they will fund the loan amount that they feel comfortable with, and then they're going to backfill with getting the SBA approval afterwards. So some of the folks that are getting approval, the lender is taking sort of a chance, that it's going to get approved by the SBA, whereas others, the larger ones like your B of A, your Huntington, your Wells Fargo, they're not going to take that chance, in order to do that. So I think that when we first started doing it, a lot of the folks that we sent to Huntington were clients of Huntington, and that helped a lot in terms of getting things done. But they're very much following the rules that they have to, whereas some of the other banks, as Art articulated earlier, they're not regulated by the different governmental bodies like the OCC, and they can do some things to be a little bit more flexible on it.
Well, and I know that during this time, everybody's learning on how to best manage their business, and makes you wonder if you should actually consider a smaller bank and having a commercial banker in the future versus, just using a larger entity to go forward. So I think that's
Great point. Yeah.
that will come forward. John, we're hitting about an hour now. Do you want to keep going, or we can also take all the questions on the chat box as well as those that were emailed and respond to them and put them on our website? I'm not sure on what people's time is looking like, so just it's up
I'm
to
going to
you.
take a few minutes. I want to let Chad from Wells Fargo talk about the consumer financing program that's available to all the members that I think will be a really good program to help as we're looking at, even when we're coming out of this, how to improve sales and get a leg up on the competition. And for those who want to stick around, it sounds like Matt and Ryan said they have a few more minutes. We can try to go until, and Matt and Ryan, don't feel free to give me the high sign. Hey, I got to get going here, but we'll keep going, and then we can filter out some questions, the answers to the question, which always we are putting on our website. So all the PowerPoint and answers to the questions, and we copied the chat box, all goes on our website as a resource in our member-only portal with the COVID-19 section that we built. So, Chad, if you could take a few minutes and get into the program that you're offering with the 0% financing.
Yeah, thank you, John. I wanted to thank the guest speakers today and their insights into this. I also wanted to thank John and Lorenzo and Amanda for setting these meetings up. And thank you guys, the Rockheads members, for choosing to partner with Wells Fargo. I'm happy to announce that we have extended the special through July 31st. During these tough times, you're able to offer your customer 12 months, no interest, if paid in full, special financing at a low dealer cost of 1.5%. That normal fee to you guys is 5.09, which is greatly reduced. So you're actually saving 3.59% during this special. The 1.5% fee is, of course, lower than taking a MasterCard or Visa, and you're providing your customers that 12 months to help them out, and make them feel comfortable during these tough times right now. If you've ever considered implementing a consumer financing in your sales process, then please call me. There's never been a better time to get started than right now. We're seeing a lot of customers look for that financing. My number to reach me is 515-204-4174. Again, that's 515-204-4174 if you guys have any questions. And just one other thing too, John, that Wells Fargo announced that the Small Business Administration has fully funded the PPP. So that money has been used up as of right now, but they are expecting them to reallocate that. And if you haven't applied for the PPP, I would still be looking to your banks to get that in, because Wells Fargo is still taking applications for that anticipation for the reallocation. So I'm gonna let you guys know that.
Gotcha. Appreciate it, Chad.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we've still got a pretty good amount of people on the call, so I'll keep going. There was a question from Vince from Rumford as well. His first question was really taken through the calculation, which we hit pretty hard, so I'm going to skip over that. But the question is there any specific items under utilities that can be considered part of the forgiveness? So how do you define utilities? Does Matt or Ryan, do you guys want to chime in on that?
Go ahead, Matt.
This is Matt. It's water. I mean, I'm taking this straight out of the bill. It's water, electric, gas, phone, internet, and then they have this item in there for transportation. As I mentioned before, I'm not admittedly sure what transportation means, but the key there is that service has to be in place prior to February 15th in order to exclude that, or to include that for your forgiveness amount. So as long as I'm sure everyone on the call, if you're running a stone shop, you've probably had all of those items in place since well before February 15th.
Transportation could be a huge number because a lot of guys have pretty extensive fleets. If they don't define it, what would you put in there? Your lease of your vehicles, your debt service of your vehicles, your gas. That could be a huge number.
Definitely not debt service. If it's debt service, meaning principal, the answer to that's going to be no, because they specifically say interest on indebtedness. I think if you have leases and that's considered a rent expense, you can probably include that under your rent as long as your leasing plan was in place prior to February 15th. But I admittedly don't know. I've had that question come up a couple times, and there's a million things that could factor into transportation. You might have salespeople with mileage reimbursements. You might have fuel costs. You might have, maintenance and repairs to some of the trucks in your fleet. I can't give you a clear answer on that.
Okay.
One thing I will note though is that the transportation, because it falls under utilities, is still subject to the overall cap of 25%.
One other clarification: do you think trash pickup would fall under utilities?
I don't. It's not specifically listed under there. So if you're trying to substantiate everything to the government, you want to try and follow as close to the guidelines as possible. And trash just isn't in there right now.
Okay, good advice. Lorenzo, your screen came off, but I'll go to the next question. Will we be able to consider both rent and mortgage interest in our calculation, or will it be? And I think you already covered it on the real estate leasing, but rent and mortgage interest. If you have another entity that you filed with your real estate and you have mortgage interest, and then you also have pay rent, can you double dip if you run them under two separate programs?
I think that's going to be a fact-specific question. Most of the time, for the folks on the line who might own their own building and kind of lease it back from an affiliated entity, in most circumstances, the entity that owns the real estate doesn't have payroll, so they wouldn't have qualified for the loan in the first place. But if under whatever circumstance that there is payroll at that entity and you have two separate loans, two separate PPP loans that are funded, and they're given one to the real estate holding company and one to the operating entity, then the real estate company could include in their forgiveness their interest on their mortgage debt, and the operating company could include in the forgiveness for their loan their rent they're paying to the real estate company.
Okay, great. Okay, the next questions are more geared towards the EIDL. So this is probably for you, Ryan. There was Kelly O'Connor from Reliable Granite and Tile submitted an application on April 8th, but hasn't heard anything. Do you have any update on that?
Yeah, we talked to the SBA this morning and last night, and then again this afternoon prior to this call, John. And they're at least 3 to 4 weeks from even being in a position to fund some of these loans for the EIDL. So it's going to be some time. I mean, they just have too many applications was their response to us, and then it's really, it's a very simple but yet accurate way to describe that current situation. So I would say, as we sit here in the middle of April, if you applied for an EIDL, I think you're going to be getting it sometime the middle part of May would be optimistic.
Gotcha. Okay, that's good feedback. On the EIDL application, there wasn't a specific amount as there was on the PPP, what you're applying for. How do they determine that amount, Ryan?
It's a really good question. We got it a number of different times. They're looking at the sales that you had prior to the disaster and then the sales after the disaster, some sort of averaging of that. I don't know that it's any really quantitative way that they're doing it, because there really isn't a field on the application for it other than supplying the SBA your profit and loss statements and sales. So it's not a great answer to your question, but I think it's more ad hoc as how they're doing it. So for example, if you were averaging 100 grand per month in sales, and after the COVID, you went down to 25 grand a month, they're going to look at that $75,000 difference in my example, and they're going to most likely make a loan based upon that calculation.
Got it. Great. Kelly, does that answer your question if you're still on?
Kinda,
Kinda.
yeah. You know, so we received a number that our application was accepted. But that's it. Now, is there further follow-up? Are they gonna call back and ask for more information?
They may ask for more information, Kelly. Unlikely at this stage. I think what's going to happen is you're going to get an amount. I don't think. I know what's going to happen is you're going to get an amount from them, and that's what they're going to fund. You know, based upon the information provided. I don't. Given the volume of applications, they are not going to be asking a lot of questions because they. You know, their goal is to give people money, but at the same time, there's a limited amount that they can allocate for everybody that's out there.
But you know, they don't have the information as far as they had before sales information, but they don't have the after information. How would they know how much we went down?
Yeah, I don't. John, did Kelly apply with us or not? I don't remember.
No, I didn't.
Okay, sorry.
No, he did on his own.
Okay. One of the things we had people provide, Kelly, when we were sending in the applications is there was a forecast within those applications that showed what you thought your sales were going to be post a disaster. And there was some additional forms for that. I don't know if you were able to fill those out or not, or saw those when on their site. But so you know. You may get a question from them on, in your particular circumstance, you know, is there additional information you can provide? But I think it's very unlikely that you'll hear many back and forth with them, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, Ryan, can we get some clarification on when the 8 weeks start? Is it when your loan is approved and you sign the loan, or is it when you receive the money?
It's the day the loan is originated. So the day you sign the documents would be the origination date, and that's when the clock starts.
Gotcha.
And hopefully that is the same day they're wiring you the money. You know what I mean, John? So I can't see it being.
Yeah, my experience with that, because I've had a couple clients get their loan docs, they're very standardized. You don't get to negotiate them. They're sort of take it or leave it, and they generally get funded within a day of signing the loan documents, but they use the date on the loan documents. So you might have a 1-day lag period, but nothing much more than that.
Gotcha.
Hey, Matt. So
Matt.
Lorenzo, I have a question. I heard that once you apply for the loan, say you have 10 people, 20 people, 100 people at an X number of payroll dollars, and then it takes 60 days, 30 days, 15 days to actually sign the loan documents. If you wanted to make some replacements within your staff, layoffs, cuts, changes, whatever, you can do that up until you actually sign the document to get the loan approval, because that's when you have to retain the same number of people on your payroll.
That's not correct. So as we went through the calculation before, when you're looking at how your forgiveness gets reduced, well, first of all, let me say, if you cut the number of staff you have and you maintain that cut throughout the 8 weeks after the loan is funded, by definition, you're going to be paying less in payroll costs, right? So your initial forgiveness amount, unless you're goosing everyone's salaries, is going to be reduced. But the time periods for which you're looking at for determining the reduction factor is, again, the numerator is the 8 weeks after the loan is funded, and the denominator is either January 1st of 2020 through February 29th of 2020, or February 15th of 2019 through June 30th of 2019. So those are the relevant periods you have to look at for headcount.
Got it.
Okay, good question.
All right, so I'm not sure how much time you guys have left. And before we jump off, because I know people are jumping off, I want to reiterate the fact that all the questions that were submitted to us, as well as those that were posted on the chat, will be answered on our website. This recording will also be available on YouTube. And I want to thank the speakers and our panelists for joining us today. Next week, we are hosting a webinar specifically related on how to create traffic to your website and developing a digital showroom. And it's going to be done by myself with Marquette Group, as well as our team from Quote Counter. And we're also going to invite Chad as well, publicly now, to talk about consumer financing. So I know a lot of traffic is now deviating from being brick and mortar to going online. So we want to give you the best possible tools to help facilitate securing traffic. If it's not for this month, it's for the next couple of weeks. So I apologize. I want to keep the line open. I have to unfortunately jump off the call. But thank you guys for being all here. And John, I'm going to keep it open and you guys can keep on talking, okay?
Yeah, hey, John.
Thank you, Lorenzo.
I've got to get moving here. I certainly appreciate everybody's time. And
okay.
If there's any questions, John Kaplan's got my email, phone number. And I would just kind of throw out there that we not only were helping folks get these applications submitted for the EIDL and the PPP. I think there'll be another round of the PPP for sure. So the gentleman from Wells Fargo that was talking, I still think it's important to get your applications in no matter what. And then we're also going to be offering a service where we're helping people on the forgiveness piece of it when that day comes. For a small fee, we'll be helping with that as well, because I think that's going to probably be more back and forth with the bank and administration with the bank, and our group has a lot of good banking relationships, and we're able to communicate effectively with them on your behalf. So if that's interesting to anybody at that time, obviously, please reach out to John, and believe me, he knows how to get a hold of me. So he's very good at it. So thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it. Matt, really appreciate your time. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no problem, Ryan. John, I've got about 15 minutes, so if you want to fire through some more questions, I'm happy to hang on for a little bit longer.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ryan, for your time, and appreciate that. Yeah, we'll pick you up on that then. Why you still got a good amount of people on the call. So next question was from Hiram at Valley View Granite. This question is really trying to be altruistic, which is if you don't really need the PPP loan or you're not affected by it, is it a problem taking the loan?
I don't think so. There is a certification that your business, when you submit the application that says, I don't have it in front of you, it's something to the effect of, the uncertainty to the business climate related to COVID has affected me, and that's why I need the loan. I think that's a pretty easy statement to make. Again, when you're submitting the application, the standard for any type of recourse on the back end, as far as if they're going to prosecute you or anything, which is very unlikely, by the way. But the standard for that is you just have to make your certifications in good faith. So, if you're a business that might supply large contractors and you've got a big job that's still going on for a hotel build out, if you were doing stone on tops or anything like that, and that's going to keep you busy for the next month or two, that's fine. But, I don't think anyone could tell what's going to happen in the future and where your next job's coming from. So I think that's a pretty easy certification to make in good faith.
Thank you. So we have you recorded. So if there is a legal action, you're there for all of us, correct?
I hope my malpractice insurance is paid up, right?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Sure.
How strict are they going to be on the reduction of workforce? If you fired people because of performance or other reasons, does that affect the loan forgiveness, or is it just a pure number?
Right now it does. So it is. I think, as you say, it is a pure number. There's no, peeking behind the curtain and figuring out why people were let go. So if you fire someone for performance or someone leaves voluntarily, that's still going to factor into the number, unless there's guidance issued on that changes it, which I doubt there will be. It's just going to be based on an absolute number.
Okay. I'm looking in the chat box. I'm not sure what this question is, but I'll just ask it. Is the employer portion of OASID included? I'm not sure who asked that, but
yeah, if whoever asked that, if they could explain what OASID is, it'd be helpful.
Yeah. Because they're not.
That's the new and improved FUTA taxes, and I don't think that employer portions are covered. It's straight wages. If I'm
Oh yeah,
not
if it's unemployment taxes, no, it's not included.
Okay.
And it's Social Security kind of thing. It's the
Yep,
whole everything in one vote. Employer portion.
Yeah, nothing for FICA or unemployment taxes is included in the payroll cost calculation.
If you use a temporary agency, is that included in payroll expense?
No, it's not. So what's interesting is when you were calculating your headcount for purposes of determining whether you're under 500 employees, you had to include temp workers in there, but on the back end, you don't get to include that as payroll unless there's some odd structure where you're paying the temps directly and issuing them a W-2, which is, I think, 0% chance of that. I represent a number of companies in the staffing industry, and generally the way it works is you just pay an hourly rate plus a markup to the staffing firm, and the staffing firm issues the W-2s. So if that's the way you're structured like it normally is, then no, it wouldn't be included in payroll costs.
Great. Let's see. Skip over that one. I think we covered this, but I'm just going to reiterate it. Well, could you offer to pay out PTO during the period as a one-time offer to increase your payroll and therefore increasing your forgiveness amount? So paying paid time off in advance during that period.
Yeah, you could include vacation time or sick leave as long as it's not under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So if you're not paying under FFCRA, yeah, that would get included in payroll costs.
This question came up, and maybe spend a little more time on it. Can you clarify the 75% of the loan proceed or 75% of the forgiveness question that we talked about earlier? So actually, maybe run through what that 75% and how that's calculated. Again, can you reiterate that?
Yeah, so it's both, right? So you have to use 75% of the loan proceeds on a general scope, right? So whether it's in the first 8 weeks after funding or otherwise, if you take let's use numbers. If you take a loan out for $1 million, ultimately 75% of what you spend, so $750,000 of that full $1 million, has to be used for payroll costs, and that's from funding through the life of the loan, right? But then when you're looking at the forgiveness period, let's say you took out $1 million loan and you spent on payroll, rent, interest, and utilities $500,000 during the 8 weeks after the loan was funded, you would have to use 3/4 of that $500,000, which, if I'm doing my math right, is like $375,000, I think, would have to get used for payroll costs. So again, if you're, ultimately your forgiveness amount is just going to get reduced until you hit 75% use for payroll costs.
Got it. So all the amount that you're asking for, even if you got $1 million loan and the forgiveness of adding up the payroll and all the other costs come to $500,000, it'd be 75% of that $500,000, not 75% of the $1 million.
That's for the payroll forgiveness. Right? Yeah. Excuse me, for the forgiveness amount. Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. I think I've gotten through all the questions. I'll open it back up if anybody wants to ask Matt something. If not, we'll close out this call. Okay, I think we burnt everybody out. So again, Matt, thank you again, man. I really appreciate it. Appreciate everybody on this call. And if anybody has any other questions, you can shoot me an email, and I'll definitely follow up, and we will be posting all this stuff on our website. So thanks again for your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, John. If anybody has questions, I think John's got my contact info. If you need to get a hold of me for supplemental questions, just feel free to reach out.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.